All right, well, thank you all so much for being here. You all look amazing. Yes, I can still see you. I'm so excited to have you all here. On behalf of Ignite, we are all very, very lucky to have you. My name is Kelsey Wong. I'm the community activator for Ignite International. Thank you. And just so we're clear, this is Ignite International, not Ignite Phoenix. I know you were confused. I get that a lot. But we're actually Ignite the course that brings purpose to life. So you guys are all going to be wowed tonight. Just a little quick announcement. After this program ends at 8 o'clock, we're going to head outside to the patio and lounge area for a little after party, a little question and answer, get to know each other, ask each other more questions. So that's what we'll do. And then also, the Gentlemen Ether are playing here at 9 o'clock. So if you want to stay for that as well, you get in for free if you have your wristband. You're welcome. So yeah, let's get started. I bet you're all curious as to why you're here. And I bet you're all curious as to why we had you put these cool name tags on. I'm sure you were thinking, that is the coolest question someone's ever asked me. You're right. We are curious as to what you're most passionately curious about. And from the answers that I saw in the audience, everything from, the stories of underdogs to, I want to change the world, to Einstein. I even saw alien invasion somewhere. That's amazing. And it's insanely awesome because it makes each of you, you. Now, what we found at Ignite is when you take your passionate curiosity and you explore it, you'll discover that it leads to your purpose in life. But it's not just about finding your purpose that matters. It's about what you do with it that really is important. Now, the very fact that you're all here tonight tells me that you're actively pursuing a meaningful, purposeful, fulfilling life. And who doesn't want that, right? So, great job so far. Now, let's give yourselves a round of applause for being here, right? Thank you. You're all awesome. So I have some good news and I have some great news for you. The good news is you made it. Yeah. The great news is today truly is the day you're going to question everything. Yeah, I know it's scary, but it's going to happen, and we're excited to bring it to you tonight. Now, without further ado, we have including me, 5 speakers. The first, let me get out of the way. Or maybe I'm in the way. Okay, I didn't practice this. All right, so before we get started, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about each speaker that's going to speak here tonight. We have Courtney Klein Johnson, inspirer, and co-founder of SeedSpot. Right? So SeedSpot is a nonprofit incubator that currently supports Arizona's most innovative social entrepreneurs. Which is awesome. I saw some of those social entrepreneurs here tonight. Raise your hand. Awesome. We also have Park Howell. Park is a storyteller. Let's give a round of applause for Park. Park is currently telling stories as the president of Park & Co. Cool name, right? And Park & Co. is dedicated to helping people, products, and companies who dare to make a difference in the world. It's pretty amazing. We also have Lauren Wong, who's a writer and change agent. We're not related. Yes, we are. I didn't just pick her because she's my sister. She's really amazing, amazing writer. Really. But yes, so Changemaker Central at ASU is an incredible space. They develop and teach students to become social change makers, and they catalyze, sustain, and inspire social change. So awesome change makers here tonight. I saw you all. That's right. We also have Dave McClurg. Now, Dave. Okay, so Dave is a leader of leaders. He's currently leading the team as the CEO of Ignite. I have the pleasure to work with him. He inspires me every day. And Dave has 30 years of innovation under his belt as an accomplished entrepreneur, executive, board member, and investor. Yay, Dave. And of course, we have Tom McDermott. So Tom, as you know, as many of you know, is a talented teacher. But he does not teach in a classroom. No, for the past 23 years, he's spent time teaching technology all around the world. That's just the way he does it. And for the past 10 years, Tom has dedicated his time exploring purpose. Not just finding purpose for himself, but helping others find purpose. And with Dave, he's built Ignite, the course that brings purpose to life. Now, you guys excited? I can feel it. All right, so today truly is the day you're gonna question everything. So prepare. Tom McDermott.
Thank you all for being here. Excited you're all here. Well, we thought since we don't have a whole lot of time tonight, we wanted to get started right away. And although it's for you to question everything, I want to start off with a couple of questions for you. And they start off pretty big, but I really want to get a feeling for, it's interesting as I've asked these questions around the world, I'm surprised actually how many people answer yes and no to these questions. So we'll start off with some big ones. Pretty simple though. Do you believe everyone is gifted? Show of hands. Now, if you don't believe it, don't do wisdom of crowds. You don't have to raise your hand. So if you don't really believe everyone's gifted, that's okay. I found a lot of people don't. And what I've also found is that's because we don't have a clear definition of what that is. And same with purpose. So how many of you believe everyone has a purpose? Not everybody does. But again, we don't have the same definition necessarily on purpose. It's interesting, I didn't ask these questions as a young kid. You're going to have to guess which one's me, by the way, if you can. So I grew up in a family of 6 kids. And although I was baptized Catholic, I didn't grow up in the church. My parents divorced when I was a little kid. But I had lots of other questions. I was certainly a curious child. I just wasn't asking those questions. When I grew up, the belief system, really the number one kind of belief system I had is really education is the key. That was probably the strongest kind of belief I had. Just, a good education equals a good job, right? How many of you kind of were taught that? And that's something that we really still talk about today. I mean, our leaders, I don't care if it's from our government, our largest education institutions, from Pew Charitable Trust to United Way, everyone really talks about a good education equals a good job. That's really the foundation for the great American dream. And that's really the era I grew up in, was the great American dream. And that was really based on you get a good education as a good job. It means economic mobility. It means I can move around, I've got options. And that's really the belief system that for 200 years, really, that is the foundation. That's why a lot of organizations are really pushing this for an economic mobility. And they said, once you do that, you have the American dream, you'll have happiness. How many of you believe that? Well, I believed that for many, many years, most of my life, until about 15 years ago. And that's how it felt, actually. I had been traveling really about 80% of my time. There was times I traveled 90% of my time. I got married pretty young, 2 beautiful kids who happen to be here. You can raise your hand if you want. But I was traveling my tail off and working hard. And actually, during that time, for any of you in the bar and restaurant business, that's what I grew up doing in Chicago. But while I was traveling, teaching technology, for some crazy reason, I tried to also open up a bar and a restaurant on the side because I thought it'd be fun. But I did that for many, many years, and I worked hard. I had that belief and that work ethic. If you work hard, right, you get married, you have kids, the white picket fence, that equals happiness. That's the great American dream. Well, that's what it felt like after a number of years. I hit a wall after I got divorced. My little brother passed away. And I moved here and did 3 startups back to back in 3 years. That was already after 3 other startups. And I hit a wall. It was about 15 years ago. And I started asking questions finally that I wasn't asking. And I was like, well, if this isn't happiness, I mean, where do you go from here? I mean, what is there? What should I be doing? Where do I go? Is this what life is? Is this what it's all about? I mean, that's what I was told. So I was kind of stuck. I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know what the answer was. And when I hit a wall, and I talked to my business partner, and I was really ready to pull the ripcord, I'd go work at McDonald's. I mean, I was working so hard, it was ridiculous, and I wasn't feeling great about anything. So I didn't know what the answers were. But I wasn't sure if I was asking the right questions, because I wasn't taught really how to search for these things and how to figure out what a great job looks like. And that's one of the other things I realized too, is that's an interesting bar that we set for one another. Get a good education so you can get a good job, and good luck. So a good job is the high bar we set. Think about that for a minute. I mean, it sounds good, but that's the high bar? I mean, most of us, you know, when we set goals, right, we don't always achieve them. I don't know if it's, you know, working out more. I don't work out as much as I should. I probably shouldn't eat the way I eat, so I don't achieve that as much. I don't eat as many salads as I should. So most of us, if we're reaching for a good job, and think about, and you guys are probably in the, you know, 2%ers, 3%ers, 4%ers. Some of you may be higher, a little lower. But the vast majority of society, that's what they're told, is get a good education, get a good job. And most fall way short, not just from an education, from getting a good job. That's why we have a huge disengaged workforce. This is actually what it felt like when I hit the wall. There were times I wept like a little kid. I mean, that's how it felt. It's like, what am I doing? And I really felt horrible. And I finally saw a coach that my friend encouraged me finally to see, because I really wasn't a very happy person. And that was the first question he asked me. Actually, we met for coffee. I didn't hire him yet. He asked me, what are you great at? What am I great at? No one's ever asked me that. You know, people say, so what's your work experience? What do you do? How many years have you been doing that? Where have you worked? Where'd you go to school? Not what are you great at? Show of hands. How many people have asked you that question? Not many, right? So I was like, I don't know. I grew up in the bar and restaurant biz. I think I take good care of people. I like helping people. Pretty good at technology. I'd already been in technology for 15 years. Very vast experience. I think I'm pretty good at that, but I don't know if I'm great. They said, well, you know, those are probably true, but that's probably not why people hire you. It's probably not why people appreciate you and like you. And I was like, okay. I didn't know how to answer that question. I had no clue what he was trying to get to. I was lost. And then the next question he asked me was, what would you do if money wasn't an issue? Now, as kids, we ask each other this, what do you want to be when you grow up? Now, as kids, I mean, it's a rhetorical question, really. I mean, I think I wanted to be a race car driver. You know, and certainly I was an athlete growing up, and I thought about those things, but I knew, really, I didn't have the talent to be, you know, a pro hockey player, soccer player, but it's what I wanted to do. But I actually couldn't answer. I was 35 years old, and I couldn't answer that question. I really had no idea. Because I got started so early in work. I only went to 1 year of college. I started working right away, heads down, work hard, great American dream, got married, and just worked hard. That's what I did. So I never went back to this question. So I had no clue. I really didn't. So I had far more questions now than answers. you know, it's really strong. I didn't know where to start. Again, what a lot of us do is rely on our experience. And I've been doing technology for so long that, you know, that's really what I know. So I was kind of stuck in that rut. And I was like, how did I get here? How did it take so many years to get here? What happened? What did my school, how come my schools didn't help me? You know, we think, and it's a weird thing, years ago education was about knowledge and getting educated. For somewhere along the way, though, we think, and I don't know what year it really happened, I haven't found the history of this, is when did we think education was going to help us really figure out what we should do in life? How many of you believed that? That college was going to tell you exactly what you should be doing with your life? That's what most of us believe. A lot of us believe that it would really help us, but it doesn't. And my parents certainly didn't have it figured out because they came from another generation. It was just about working hard, right? So I wasn't finding any answers. And I really struggled with it because this is what I was taught. That's the only thing I knew. And if you work hard enough, you can be anything. How many of you were taught that? That you could be anything? Well, guess what? That's not true. Although I think I'm sexy, I'm not going to be Justin Timberlake. It's just not in the cards, right? I mean, it's just, you can't be anything, okay? You can be great at something, but you can't be great at everything. You can't just pick something and say, I'm just going to work. How many of you have seen the movie Rudy and know the story of Rudy Rudiger from Notre Dame, right? Worked hard and he loved football. He's passionate about football. But it's a Hollywood movie. He never played. He never played. It's just, you know, and it's a nice idea, just like get a good education, it's a nice idea. It's well-meaning. And so is this. It's well, and believe me, I still work hard. I have a good work ethic. I always have. And I believe that. But I don't believe just by working hard you're going to get what you want. Or just by working hard at anything, that's what you can achieve. These were beliefs that were instilled in me. And unfortunately, that's when I hit that wall. I realized, and that's when I finally started to question these things. I'm like, well, these are nice adages. These are nice beliefs, but they're flawed. And we're still telling people this. And I'm trying to wake people up because it's just not true. Am I the only one struggling with that? As I was asking, it was interesting. When I hit that wall, it was interesting because none of my friends were talking about this. Everyone was heads down and just working. And where I grew up, most of my friends, I thought, had it all figured out. Early in high school, they knew exactly where they were going to go to college. They knew where they were going to go to medical school, law school, you name it. Their family had it all charted out. And they knew exactly where they were going. And the friends I was working with, although I only went to 1 year of college, my business partners and things like that all had college degrees, and they seemed like they had it all figured out. Well, they didn't. They just weren't talking about it. You know, especially as males, our egos are so huge that we don't talk about it. It was only the last 20 years or so that we started talking about our problems. Now, being supposed to be the breadwinner, that's the last thing we're going to talk about, right? Is, well, I'm kind of struggling with my job. I don't know what I should do with life. You think a guy's going to talk about that? Really? No. So I realized, even though my friends weren't talking about it, this was a much bigger problem than I realized, a much bigger problem. And today, we know these studies, but this was 15 years ago when I hit this wall. But today, these are some of the reports. These are some of the stats. Now, they only talk about an unengaged workforce. An unengaged work, that's an interesting word. And how they're even measuring engagement, to me, is quite a joke. But again, is that the bar we're setting? And just so you know, in corporate America, that is the high bar. Right now, it's been that way for about the last 10 years, is we're measuring engagement. And that's the high bar. Really? An engaged workforce. Okay. So I started to finally try and dig deeper. What's really going on here? Why does this, how did we get here? And are we asking the right questions? Is this really how we're going to solve problems in the world by an unengaged workforce? And then I started reading books about passion, and everyone's talking about passion being the answer. How many of you believe passion's the answer? Well, all you have to do is watch those kids on American Idol. And it's just like people that work hard. It's not enough. It's a nice idea, but it's not enough. And you don't get me wrong, you should absolutely love what you do. No question about it. I love what I do every single day. And by the way, for what I do, I don't believe in a work-life balance. Because I'm doing what I was born to do. It's part of my life. It's part of who I am. I would talk about this stuff, whether it was Saturday morning, midnight, tonight. This is who I am. This is what I do. So I don't believe in that work-life balance. So I do love what I do because I'm living my purpose every day. But to search for a career, to use it basically as your search engine, what am I passionate about? I think that's a huge mistake. Again, I grew up playing sports, and I love sports, but I wasn't that talented at it. And again, look at American Idol. But I think a lot of people are still struggling trying to figure out what they should do because they search for passion. And that's not the answer. So I started to kind of go back to these beliefs that I had that were instilled in me about working hard, things like that, passion. And I started to think that that's really what the problem is, and that we're really not asking the right questions. So I left my company. How many of you know AmazingMail.com, one of the startups I did many years ago? And I left that company. It was funny, that the coffee I had with that coach, he knew my team members because we had done another startup together. And he said, Tom, you need to leave right away. It's going to kill you. Literally, this job is going to kill you. He knew my business partners. He said, you got to get out. So I literally, after meeting him, it was like a week or two later, I left the company and started a new search. It really took some time off. Couldn't take a lot of time off, but I did take some time off, but then landed another job. He said, all right, take that other job, but we're going to spend some time figuring this out. And for the next year, I spent a lot of time working with him on what I should do. And he asked me a ton of questions. But as I went through that, I started to think about some of the beliefs I had and some of these other ideas. Again, I grew up playing hockey and soccer at a very young age. Again, guess which one is me? I'm the tall one in the back. But I started to think about that, and I knew at a young age that although I was talented, that really I wasn't as good as some of the other players. Actually, I was one of the best on my team, but as you start to travel and meet other kids, you can see when somebody really shined. You can see when somebody could just sing naturally, other things. So I started to think about talent in a different way. That it's interesting how we look at talent, and we think talent matters in sports, but for nothing else. And I realized, and I grew up in a really nice area, and I was exposed to some amazing teams and coaches and opportunities, and I realized we do an amazing job helping some find talent. And we actually look for talent at a very young age in kids, and they actually have talent identification systems in sports around the world where they really look for certain attributes, but not just for a sport. They look for certain attributes for certain positions. And they do that actually in the arts as well, for dance, for music. Am I a better violin player than a piano player, right? And they look for that, and then they groom these kids. They get mentoring and coaches. I mean, how many parents do we have that take their kids all over the city or all over the country and following in their sports teams and other things and grooming them in hopes that they can do something great with that? So we put talent in this incredible pedestal, and the time and money we put searching for talent and grooming talent in athletics and arts is amazing. But what do we do for everybody else? We say, well, for you, you need to get a good education so you can get a good job. That's what we do. Think about that. Why doesn't talent matter for the rest of us? I can't sing. I could dance a little bit, but I can't sing. Definitely can't sing. Can't draw. So I don't have artistic talents, but I definitely have talents. But no one really pointed that out to me, that my talents matter unless I'm on the field. And that's what our education system does. And that's what our parents does, and that's what society does, is they say, well, get a good education, you'll figure it out, don't worry about it, we'll help you. And that's really a society we have. But what I realized because of that, and we don't look at talent, we have far too many people in the wrong role. As I started to think about this, I started to think about this from a position standpoint. Just like athletics, or just like, a band member, am I the backup singer? Am I a bass player? Am I a guitar player? Am I the singer? It's a position that matters based on your talent. We all know what a great leader looks like, and thankfully I found one in Dave, because that's not my talent. But I realized years ago when I started this journey that talent does matter, and that's what my coach helped me figure out, that talent does matter, but we weren't asking those questions. So I started to really think about that. And I realized there's very few people in the world killing it. I mean, really in their sweet spot. Really killing it. I don't know how many people you know, and I don't mean financially successful. I mean in their given industry, really the standouts. Oh man, this dentist I know, he's phenomenal. I mean, how many people say that, really? And how many gifted teachers did you truly have? Truly gifted teachers, right? So to me, I started really to think about this. I'm like, wow, how do we get here? How come it's only, the people like this that we kind of put up on a pedestal and kind of look at? And I realized, I came to this conclusion actually after about 5 years of researching this problem. And I realized about 95% of the world, actually since then, so this was about 10 years ago, I came to this conclusion. And I've actually been testing this theory every day since. And I actually now think that number is about 98%. And when I say wrong role, I'll get into it in a little while, but I think really not doing what you're born to do. Really not in your sweet spot. Now, that number doesn't mean everyone's way off. Some people are just a little off. Again, maybe a great leader, but just at the wrong company. That's still the wrong role for me, if you're at the wrong company, right? Or singing in the wrong band or on the wrong team, right? Or a teacher in the wrong school. So you could be a little off, but some people are completely out of position, and I've done that myself many times, and that's what happened to me. I've been the CEO of my company before. Not a good idea. Not a natural-born leader. And the mistake we make, too, is we say, well, you can go to leadership class. You can go learn to be a great leader and read great books about leadership. And that's true. But that's knowledge. And we made this mistake that knowledge is going to replace talent, what somebody naturally has. You can send me to music school to the day I die, and I'm never going to be Mozart. Nor am I going to be Justin Timberlake. It'd be nice if I could at least dance like it, but I can't do it. But we make these mistakes, and I can dribble basketball from here till the day I die, and I will never be as good as Michael Jordan. It's just not in the cards. So I see people all over in the wrong way, and people mean well, and they're working hard, just like teachers. I hear it all the time. Well, we can't be hard on teachers. They really love their students. They care, and they're working hard. Well, that's great, but that's not getting it done. Again, look at the kid on American Idol. Well, he works hard and he cares. So are you going to pay to go see him? But why do we do that in other areas of business? Why do we accept that, well, they're working hard? And don't get me wrong, I worked hard too. I didn't want to get fired. But I think we're asking the wrong questions. Is that really where they're most talented? Is that really what they should be doing? And I realized this was a huge problem. And again, working hard is nice, but what's the result of that for us individually? And for me, what I've found is a lot of unhappy people like I was. I mean, people are working hard, but is that the high bar we want to set for ourselves? Is work hard and have a good job? I mean, it's nice. It's a nice thought. But what I found, too, is it's not just unhappiness. We have failure. Failure on an individual level. That's why restaurants fail. That's why bars fail. That's why individuals fail. That's why startups fail. People in the wrong position. Just because you have a great idea Number one, doesn't mean you should take that idea and do something with it. Number two, doesn't mean you should be the CEO. I see that all the time, and I was guilty of it. I did it myself. And I'm not doing it this time, because that's not where my talent is. And I see it all the time. And to me, I started to think about this in a bigger way, that this isn't just about helping people and coaching people. I thought about that, helping friends and family, but I saw this as a much bigger problem. That this isn't just about coaching people and helping people get a little more happiness and a little better. I saw this as a systemic problem. I now started to look at this at a much bigger level and say, well, if that many people are truly in the wrong role, catastrophe can happen, right? We know what it looks like when we have a bad chef, right? Or bad service at the restaurant, it closes down. But we also have catastrophe. To me, the financial, all you have to do is look at Washington, right? I mean, how many of those knuckleheads should be out of there? I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about people in the right position. Is that really what most of them are born to do? Do you really believe that? I don't. So I started to look at all problems. I started to look at famine, poverty, disease, war. Do we really have the right people working on them? Again, well-intentioned people, but we have the wrong people. We have people picking the wrong careers for the wrong reasons. And I don't want to pick on teachers, but my mom's a teacher, my sister's a teacher, and I taught most of my career. But people go into teaching for the wrong reasons. Again, well-intentioned, because you love kids and you want to help them, but if you're not a helpful teacher, if you're not a gifted teacher, you're in the wrong place, or you're teaching the wrong subjects. Again, and I ask this question when I meet with people all the time, how many gifted teachers you have? It's usually one or two. You know how many teachers you have in the course of an average K through 12? 48 to 60. And most have one or two gifted teachers. What does that say? That's about 2% really should be teaching. That's a problem. And wait a minute. So wait, we're relying on education for us to advance, but the teachers teaching shouldn't be teaching. I see a problem. Again, well-meaning, but there's a problem there. And I see it as a global problem because countries around the world are following our education system. And you see it all over, and I've traveled quite a bit around the world, and I see it all over. Now, some education systems think they're getting better. For example, in China and some other places, they'll take the top mathematicians, and they say, you know what, you need to go teach for a couple of years. But that's not the answer. How many of you know incredible mathematicians, but can they teach you math? It's a very different talent. Understanding math and be able to do math is not the same talent as teaching math. So to me, we still don't quite have it right. We haven't figured it out. And I've spent about 15 years working on this problem. Been wondering about this problem since I hit that wall. So I had to first figure it out for myself. And I went back to that question my coach had asked me, really, you know, what are you talented at? And I didn't know. And it took some time, but he asked me some questions, again, that no one had ever asked me before. He asked me a question about my, people I worked with, what do they appreciate about you? How about your friends? And then it dawned on me, it reminded me that when I was a kid, people always used to say, Tom, you'd be a great teacher. And that was weird. And at work, people always asked me for help with things, but I never saw it as a teacher when they'd ask me questions. Even as kids, when people say, Tom, you'd be a great teacher, that's what you should do, I didn't see what they saw in me. They saw something in me I didn't see in myself. Because they'd ask me a question and I'd explain it to them, and because that's what friends do. I didn't see that as a talent. But apparently it was. And I landed a job teaching. Actually, I taught early in my technology career. It was actually my second job. I started doing networks many, many years ago. I'm not going to tell you how old I am. I think we were really the early stages of networks. But did that early on, but got away from it because I was also, one of those things I was taught is you got to move up the corporate ladder if you want to make more money. And that's what we're taught too. Instead of thinking about a position where you're phenomenal at, we're taught that you should want to climb the corporate ladder because you should want to advance, and advancement is about moving up as opposed to being phenomenal at a position just like in athletics or arts. And I mean, that's another belief that to me is way out of whack. Because if you're a great leader, you should be a great leader and you should start at the top at least in a division. But I didn't want to move up the ladder. And the more I moved up the ladder, I realized the more miserable I got. The further I got away from teaching, the worse it got. So the first job I took after I hit that wall was a teaching job. And I didn't take it because I had figured this out. I just happened to land that job. I just said, okay, I'll do this. It fit me really well. It was during the dot-com days, and I started teaching internet security during the dot-com days when everyone's trying to figure it out. It's kind of funny, everything that's going on with the NSA now. It's what I taught many years ago. Identity management, access control. He wouldn't have access if I taught them that back then. But what I also figured out was why I was good at that. Why I was great at that was not just because of my talent, it's because of my strengths. When I was teaching internet security, I was teaching theory. I was teaching high-level stuff, futuristic thinking, big picture thinking in companies. I was teaching government and the military back then. And I was helping them think about how they need to secure their environments from a very holistic standpoint. Back then, all data was siloed, and you had to have a single password for 50 systems within your own company. And it was a huge mess. And it was working, again, with the governments around the world where contractors would have to get access to data just like what's going on with Snowden right now. But when that contract was done, they still have access. So we'd have to teach them to do big picture thinking, futuristic thinking. And that's why I realized I was really good at it. And I had empathy and other things, and I was really optimistic, and I helped them. So I started to realize why I was really good at this job. And I started to really excel in this job, and I was in it for about 5 years. And what happened, it was amazing. It was the best job I ever had. I had made more money in this job than ever before, and I was only working about 20 hours a week. Now, I had to fly around the world, but I'd fly around the world, do a 2-hour chalk talk, and then go sit on the beach. Go fly somewhere else, do a 2-hour chalk talk, and then go climb a mountain or go ride a mountain bike. It was cake because it was just, I was born to do that job. One of the things I figured out and why I wouldn't be a great teacher in a classroom is I also looked at, how many of you have done like Myers-Briggs or DISC, these other things? Personality type, now Myers-Briggs and DISC are different. One looks at workplace behaviors, the other looks at personality in general. But as I started to look at that and look at what motivated me, I figured out what an ideal environment looked for me based on my psyche. And what I realized is that traveling around was ideal for me because I loved that diversity. I needed that diversity of place and people. I needed a varying schedule. For me to go into a same classroom every day, I'd die. I'd stifle. I had to teach in a K through 12, even though I may be a talented teacher. I didn't realize you guys couldn't see that, by the way. But I wouldn't last in the classroom. And that's why I talk about people in the wrong role isn't just based on talent. So just because I'm a great teacher doesn't mean I can teach everywhere. I realize that my strengths matter. And an analogy I use all the time is Michael Jordan. And when I look at talent, I use that example a lot where was he, for those of you who know him, was he a better basketball player or baseball player? I mean, it's not even close, right? But he loved baseball, but he wasn't as talented. But you have to look at his strengths to realize why that is. What was his nickname? Air Jordan. don't really need that strength on the baseball field, do you? Right? And that was one of his greatest strengths, the ability to elevate himself and maintain air. Yeah, not really used on baseball. So we have to look at, and it's interesting because StrengthsFinder is one of the biggest assessments out there, and I'm a huge fan. But strengths don't tell you what position you should play, what role you should be in. That's great to know that I'm empathetic, optimistic, big picture thinker, future, but what position should I use it in? So we look at strengths in a supporting role to a talent. Just like if I'm a great singer, lots of great singers, but what makes me a great singer? And I'm not, I already told you I'm not. But do I hit the high notes, or do I have great range, or can I hit the low notes? Right? Or am I a great baseball pitcher? I've got a phenomenal curveball or a fastball. So we look at talent, and then what are your supporting strengths? But also, what's an ideal environment based on your psyche? Now, I'd figured all this out. Again, this was about 14 years ago. It took me about a year to figure this out for me, and I was about 5 years into this job, and I was killing it. I really thought this was it. I thought I'd finally figured it out because I was far happier than I had been, because I really felt like not only was I, for all current standards, successful. I was at the top of my global company. They put me on all the tough assignments around the world. I was sought after by the top security firms in the world, and I was speaking at the security conferences around the world. I thought, well, it doesn't get any better than that. How does it get better than that? So to me, I really believed I found my sweet spot, that was it. How many of you read Jim Collins' Good to Great? Right seat on the bus? I was sure I was on it. I was driving it. I'd been doing it, and it really didn't get better. My personal life finally started to turn around. Life started to finally look a lot better for me. But I was flying home from Australia on a trip 10 years ago. It was almost 10 years. Yeah, it was about 10 years ago. And I was feeling great about things. I went back to that question that my old coach had asked me: if money was an issue, what would you do? And because I'm 5 years into this, and I really had spent an amazing amount of time studying this problem, thinking about it, and working on it for myself, that I had it now down pat. I said I'd be teaching theory and flying around the world. I'd do it for free. Absolutely would do it for free. Loved it. But then I said, but would I be teaching technology? It's like, ooh. Only took me a second to say no. It's like, holy crap. I thought this was it. I'm like, wait a minute. Is that really what I should be doing? If money wasn't an issue, no, that's not what I'd be doing. I'm like, I have to start over? I thought I had this just figured out. But as I thought about it, I thought, well, what would I teach? And I thought about the conversations I had with friends. I thought about the books on my shelves. And I just spent, 5 years of my life chasing down this problem, not just for me, but I was looking at it from societal perspective. How many people are in the wrong role? What's wrong with our schools? All these things we just went through, I thought about. And I thought, well, God, I'd love to teach this stuff. The stuff I'm talking about right now, I'd love to teach that. I do that for free. But where do I start? How do I do that? But a couple epiphanies hit me. I thought, not only would I love to do that, but I'm never going to leave my mark on the world teaching someone else's theories. And I thought, well, wait a minute. Einstein, I kind of was, and this all happened on one plane flight, by the way, but it's about 18-hour flight, so I had a lot of thinking to do. But I went back to Einstein's old quote. I have no particular, he did, by the way. He was a mathematician, which led him to be a physicist. But he was passionately curious about something. So I started to think about that. I read a lot of Einstein. I read a lot of Aristotle. One of my favorite quotes is, where your talent and the needs of the world cross, therein lies your vocation. So I started to think about the philosophers. I started to think about the greats. And how did they figure? What did they do? How did they leave their mark on the world? And I realized that they really put their talent to work on what they were most passionately curious about. Now, it's funny when I talk to a lot of people about Einstein, and if there's a mathematician in the room, they say, well, he wasn't a very good mathematician. Well, he's certainly a lot better than me. And the question is he the best mathematician in the world? That's not the point. I'm not the best teacher in the world. That's not the point. The point is, what did he put his math to work on? He could have built bridges, roads, buildings, water bottles. We need math for all kinds of things. But he put it to work on what he was passionately curious about. He actually shared his discoveries through his math. So I started to think about that differently, and I started to think about really all the greats, everyone that leaves their mark on the world, does it through discovery. They have a different perspective on things, and they think about it, they wonder about it, and they bring something about in a different way, and they share that through their talent. And you look at any of the greats, and if you really start to look at them this way, you really start to look at them differently. Martin Luther King clearly thought about inequality. Now, he could have done lots of things with that. He could have started riots, right? He could have written books. He could have done a lot of things. But what did he do with it? He was clearly a gifted speaker, yeah? But what if he wasn't? We wouldn't know who he was. Even if he had amazing discoveries around inequality or had lots to share, if he wasn't a talented orator, we would know his name. Nor would we know his name if he wasn't passionately curious about this and saw something, realized something that the rest of us didn't see. So I started to look at lots of people and realize, well, I started to look at these things as kind of the pillars for how people leave their mark on the world. And Steve Jobs, a lot of people don't know what he was curious about. A lot of people say technology. Anyone know why he chose Apple as the brand name? What's that? That's true. For Steve, the apple was really the simplest form of beauty. It was a really elegant design by nature. He believed it was the most beautiful fruit and simplistic but incredibly amazing thing. So what he wanted to do with everything, if you look at his old videos, read any of his old stuff, again, I started in technology in the dark ages, so I used to follow him a lot. But for him, everything is about elegant design. He didn't invent the MP3 player, nor the tablet, or any of these things. He just made them more beautiful. What do you think his talent was? Leader? Yeah, not a good leader. Actually, a horrible leader. Lots of friends at Apple, and there's lots of tales about how much of a schmuck he was, and he'd throw laptops and phones against the wall and say, you got to make him better. Not a great leader. But he was an amazing visionary. He saw things differently. Not only did he see things differently, but he got others to see things differently. And he got industries to change because he said, this is where we need to go. This is where the world's going. We need to go this way. And he changed, as we know, changed the mobile industry, changed the music industry, right? Changed the computer industry, because he was a visionary. There's great stories about when he was with Johnny Ives. There's a lot of them. The one that always comes to mind for me is in the 70s, actually, no, in the early 80s. I don't know how many of you had one of their monitors, their first monitor that had that pivot on it, that had the mushroom base and the pivoting arm, the articulating arm. That came from, Steve was in his backyard in Marin with Johnny. They were just sitting outside talking about that design, actually before they came up with that design, and he saw the sunflowers in his backyard waving in the wind. And he saw the head of the sunflower and how beautiful that was. And he said, why don't we design something on an articulating arm like that? And that's where that design came from. A lot of his designs came from nature and his observation of simplicity in nature. And that's how he changed a lot of things, because it's what he wondered about. Oprah's somebody I studied a lot. And it's interesting, I don't know how much of this crowd knows Oprah, but I really studied her and wondered how she left her mark in the world. But for me, what Oprah was most passionately curious about was the human spirit and its ability to overcome. She didn't leave her mark on the world by doing interviews with Tom Cruise and John Travolta. That's not really how she left her mark on the world. She was really moved by stories of people that overcame some difficulty. I watched her as she'd interview somebody that went through some incredible journey. Maybe their family had perished, or they were crippled or whatever, but incredibly positive and optimistic, and they overcame these challenges. And I'd watch her as she'd interview these people, and really she'd genuinely wonder about how they were able to do that. And then she'd pull those stories out of them, and then she'd pivot to the audience, and she'd inspire and motivate the audience that they could do the same. And that's how she left her mark in the world. But what a lot of people don't realize is the reason she wonders about that, the reason she's passionately curious about that, is because of her own journey, her own life story. She grew up, very difficult childhood, poor childhood, abused as a child, raped as a young child, but she doesn't know how she became the woman that she became other than hard work and some luck. So she's wondering through others, how do we do that? How did I get here? How do we as human beings overcome these challenges? She's still chasing that, and she's still wondering about it. What's interesting, and that's why I talk about role all the time, is now she's running her own network. I don't think as a young child she wondered about cable programming. What should we put in the 10 a.m. time slot? I don't think that's really what's inside her. Nor is her talent really being a leader of an organization. Now, could she? That's not the question. Of course she could. She's smart, she's capable. I mean, I could too. The question is, to what degree of success? So it's not, can I do it? Can she do it? It's how successful will her network be if she continues to be the CEO? If she continues to do that? Is that really where she's going to continue to have her greatest impact on the world? I don't think so. So that's how I started to think about the question was, where can you make your greatest impact? And no one had ever asked me that question either. They'd say, where can you be great? And that wasn't until many years ago. But then where can you have your greatest impact? Where can you really leave your mark on the world? And I found the greats that did it through passionate curiosity. And then that's when it hit me, that really what I was most curious about were these problems. I had been chasing this down for years, and I realized I was actually curious about this since I was a little kid, but school kind of pushed it away from me. It said, well, don't worry about that stuff, Tommy. That's not important. You need to worry about this stuff. But growing up in a family of 6, I wondered about where I belonged. I wondered where I fit. What was my place in the world? I wondered about that stuff, but people told me it wasn't important. So I realized curiosity was this amazing thing that we've overlooked. And I've really come to believe it is the most amazing attribute that we have, bar none. And sadly, our schools don't realize that. We've overlooked it. We kind of think about it generally like creativity. But if you really think about curiosity as an attribute, our sense of wonder, think about what we wouldn't have in the world if we didn't have curiosity. Curiosity, first and foremost, is the desire to learn. Think about if we didn't have a desire to learn anything. If we were indifferent to everything, we would have perished many years ago. Wouldn't have figured out fire, wouldn't have figured out the wheel, nothing. Because we didn't care. We didn't want to learn. Didn't even want to know your name. Didn't care. I'm just going to be over here. Think about that. Curiosity is the impetus to go, hey, what's that? Whatever it is. It's, it's anything. What's your name? Where are you from? But it's the desire to learn. Everything that we have in this world stems from somebody being curious about it. Everything we have. It's really the spark that ignites all creativity and imagination. Without curiosity, we have zero creativity and imagination. Because that comes after we say, what's that? I wonder if instead of doing it that way, we could do it this way. It's because you wonder about, then you get creative and you imagine what it would be like if it was different. We wonder what it would be like if I had a different job. I wonder what it would be like if I had a different girlfriend. Probably not happy about that, but but imagination and creativity of everything, including the wheel, including hunting implements from many, many years ago. We wouldn't have advanced anything. Anything. And it's really where all solutions come from. Anything we have, even a bottle of water, right? Somebody had to wonder, I wonder if we could sell a bottle of water for $2. Right? Somebody thought about that. And they had to think about, well, how are we going to ship it? Are they going to pay? Do we sell it by a bottle? Do we sell it in a case? How do we do that? Right? All products and services, everything comes from that. All discovery starts with being curious. But what I also realized is we're not all curious about the same things, right? Which is actually one of the coolest things about it. Growing up in a family of 5 boys, 2 of my brothers love cars. Not my thing. Don't really care. Just put gas in it and drive it. Right? But they just love cars. They've always had car magazines. They've always been interested in cars. And I mean, whenever one of my brothers sees a new car, it's like, God, did you see the new car? It's like, nah, I didn't really see it. Right? But people are curious about all kinds of things, from lighting to technology to some people are like just amazed by chairs, like, oh my God, that is really cool. But that's a cool thing, because those are the people that are going to make the next one even cooler. But someone's got to be curious about it. And thankfully somebody is. Somebody's curious about all kinds of things. We wouldn't have any advancements without it. But I also realized as I was on this journey that it was because of my own curiosity and sense of wonder that I figured things out, not only for myself, but life and bigger picture. But I realized that it was this curiosity I'd had from a young age, and even though my school pushed it out of me, once I kind of hit that wall and started to think again and wonder again, I started to think about these problems. But again, I thought about individuality and uniqueness at a young age. And what I didn't realize is I daydreamed really about it a lot, but because I had work and other things, I'd kind of forget about it. But I realized that whether you're daydreaming, whether you just get out of the shower, you're brushing your teeth, driving to work, there's all this imagination and creativity going on that we're really not tapping into. And I think about how when I talk about people in the wrong role, how many people have ideas, but their jobs aren't aligned with those ideas. I think about somebody sitting on the beach watching the waves roll in, and he's sitting with his family on vacation and just sitting there maybe with a beer in his hand and just kicking back, watching his kids, and watching the waves pass over the kids and knock them down, and think about how powerful that is. How powerful the waves are, and think about the huge ocean and amazing power in the ocean and going on every day around the world, and then the tides, and then how they wash up and pull people out, and that amazing power around the world we have. And think about, God, if we could harness that energy, maybe we could power cities around the world. And then he goes back to work on Monday, working for his dad's insurance company. And that idea goes away. That happens every day around the world, millions and millions and millions of times. When people have ideas, they're curious, they wonder about things, but they're not aligned with what they're passionately curious about. And I believe those are where the answers to the world come from. Not just leaving your mark, not just through creativity, not just Shakespeare wondered about tragedy and comedy. Picasso wondered about faces and noses. You think about all the greats that left their mark, they were passionately curious. But I think that's where all discovery comes from, and that's what's going to help us with the poverty problem in education. We need people that are naturally curious about that. I think about people working on the poverty problem all the time, and I think we've got the wrong people working on it, just like in schools, although well-meaning. Are they the right people? And just because you're a great leader doesn't mean that's the problem you should be working on. The person that you want working on the problem is when they were a little kid, they were walking down the street with mom and they saw somebody sleeping under a cardboard box. Said, Mom, how come they're sleeping on the street? And how come we have soup kitchens? How come we don't have to go? How come Tommy wears the same clothes to school every day? That's the kind of person that's wondering about it all the time that you want working on the problem. Not somebody that's working on it because it's a job. Because if I'm that guy working on the poverty problem, but I'm also the guy that works on cars on the weekend because I love cars, there's a misalignment of really where I can do my best work. And that goes on every day, that people are really passionately curious about one thing, and they're going to work for something completely different. And I believe curiosity is the most amazing gift we have that we're not tapping into. And for me, what I realized for me was this curiosity that I had around this subject, that's where my purpose was, and that's what I needed to do. And that's where I finally put everything together, was how I could really leave my mark on the world, was teaching this finally. And this is what I finally decided to teach, and that's what I needed to do, was to teach this, that my life needed to be set up, that this is what I needed to teach. I started to look at career differently, that this is what I needed to teach people about, and this is how I was going to spend my life. It wasn't about the job or the company I was at. It was just about what I was going to teach. And that this is what I'll teach until the day I die. For me, Ignite is just part of my journey. When people ask me what I do, I don't say I'm the founder of Ignite, I'm the chief Ignite. I don't say that. They say, what do you do? I say, I teach. Oh, really? What do you teach? I teach people how to find and fulfill their purpose. That's what I do. Thanks for your time, everybody.
Incredibly humbled to be here tonight. Incredibly honored that Tom invited me to share just a bit of my story in 3 to 5 minutes. But first wanted to acknowledge, Tom, that I think it's incredibly powerful to watch someone that's living their purpose and watch you speak and share your journey. And I think it's a powerful testimony to the courage that it really takes to share the depths of who you are and the journey that it's taken to get you here. So I applaud you, not only for doing what you're doing, but for sharing it publicly. Not a lot of people can do that, so I applaud you for that. Yeah, the embarrassing family photos start early. So my name is Courtney Klein. I am currently the co-founder of SeedSpot. And I'll get into a bit about my journey and how I got there, but as a young child, I was raised primarily by my mother. My parents divorced when I was 6 years old, just shortly after this photograph was taken, just a few years really. And all through my childhood, I was purported to be something incredible, right? My mother wanted me to be a doctor, wanted me to be a lawyer, wanted me to be something that the public would recognize as being successful, right? How many of us, lots, have been in that boat, that our parents, support network, people around us, teachers, educators, always wanted us to aspire to something that others would deem publicly as being incredibly successful. And so throughout my childhood, I grappled with what would that look like? What would that mean? What was I meant to do? And all through junior and high school, people ask you, what are you going to go study in college? And what do you think you're going to do with your life? And I entered Arizona State University as a broadcast journalism major. I aspired to be Katie Couric. I wanted to live in New York and work on national television and tell the world stories to homes across the country. And when I entered the Walter Cronkite School, there was something fundamentally that shook me that just wasn't quite right. Something didn't align. And I really couldn't pinpoint what that was at the time. I didn't know why it wasn't resonating to stick a microphone in front of someone's face and ask them, how are you feeling this moment of tragedy? And it felt fundamentally alternative to who I was. And so after my freshman year in college, I traveled to a rural village in Mexico. And I lived in the Yucatan Peninsula in a village called Aquil. And I was there witnessing a community that had just been devastated by a hurricane. And I was there with 12 other college students living in a hut, sleeping in a hammock. We were burning our toilet paper. We were showering in the rain. I mean, by American standards, had absolutely nothing. And yet I was the happiest I had ever been. And I realized in that moment, in that summer, that I was really happy because I was helping enable a community to revitalize itself, right? I was enabling and inspiring and motivating and out walking the streets and pounding on doors to say, we're going to rebuild this community together. I'm not going to rebuild it. You are. But we're going to rebuild this community together. And I spent my summer there really questioning, how is it that this community is going to regenerate itself? And how is it that at the age of 18, I've never witnessed a community like this before? How is it that poverty and inequality and everything that's wrong, quote unquote, with the world, how is it that at the age of 18, raised in a middle-class family in Mesa, Arizona, I had never witnessed this? And how many people in the world are unaware of their individual capacity to change it? And so I came back from the Yucatan, devastated my mother, informed her that I was no longer going to become Katie Couric, and I changed my major to nonprofit management, walked in the door and said, I want to start a nonprofit organization, please authorize the major change. And the person that was supposed to authorize the major said, well, lots of students come in and say they're going to start a nonprofit when they graduate, they're going to study nonprofit and do something great in the world, but few of them actually really do. I was like, really? Like, you're doubting an 18-year-old that has a dream, right? A passion to do something with the, are you kidding me, right? And I changed my major, despite this professor's intent to dissuade me. And in my senior year in college, I submitted a business plan to an initiative at ASU. And the idea was to start a nonprofit organization that would educate high school students across the country about international issues and local issues and empower them to create change in their own local and national and international communities and partner with people around the world to inspire a global change. I received a $1,000 seed grant from Arizona State University. And to cut a long story short, launched Youth Reaction Corps, this organization that has subsequently merged with an organization in San Francisco and is now New Global Citizens. Jennifer Volman's in the room somewhere, the new executive director. And this organization, over the course of several years, empowered students across the country to realize that they had the capacity at 15, 16, 17, 18 years old to do something about problems that they saw in the world. And people in schools and donors and foundations started to grab onto this idea that we could really fundamentally change the course of history if we started to spark in young people this idea that you could take ownership and take authority and do something different if you believed you were capable of changing things. And so as I led the organization for 7 years, it grew and grew exponentially. 14 states now, 33 countries. And with that came this public perception. And this photograph was taken by the Arizona Republic, and I think over the course of leading the organization, there were likely, truly, 30 to 40 articles, magazine covers, awards, accolades, right, projected on me. And that's not a yay, Courtney, go, the media grabbed a hold of you. It was really a challenging thing for me to figure out, what does this mean? And why are people paying attention to me and the work that I'm doing? And why does that matter? And what shifted for me in that was this, what am I motivated by? And am I motivated by what my mother wanted me to achieve, that I would do something that was worthy of public accolade? And it became very confusing for me, because you're expected and you receive all this external validation, but that wasn't the driving force for why I was doing what I was doing. Quite frankly, I could give a shit, right? But the public poured that on, and I started to question, what is it that I'm really doing? What is it that I'm really passionate about within this? And so through that process, I wanted to build the organization to a place that it could survive without me. I knew that it was a transition moment for me after 7 years. Secured $1 million endowment from the Arizona Community Foundation, a challenge grant that Jen Volman has securely closed recently, and the organization's flourishing, right? But I positioned this organization with the expectation that I would go on and explore what else was meant for me, knowing that this was not what I would do forever. And so I spent time thereafter in coffee shops and talking with other entrepreneurs, talking with dreamers across the state, realizing that there was this network of people statewide that wanted to do something with their lives. They wanted to change the human condition in some capacity. They wanted to make the world a better place. And whether they were coming to me for advice or insight or inspiration, I didn't know, but I knew that I loved sitting at coffee shops on nights and weekends, talking with other people that had dreams about making the world a better place. And so a year and a half after leaving New Global Citizens and spending lots of time in between in random jobs and cubicles and trying to figure out who I was meant to be, I co-founded with Chris Petroff an organization called SeedSpot. And the intention behind SeedSpot is to inspire dreamers, inspire entrepreneurs, and help support people that believe that the world can function differently. And in our first cohort last summer, we had 191 entrepreneurs from across the state of Arizona apply, and we took 16 companies, 16 entrepreneurs, 16 dreamers into our program. And we supported them for 8 months, helping them get their ideas off the ground. And a few of them are here tonight. And I truly could not be more proud at the fact that there are other people in the world trying to fundamentally change the human condition in a way that they believe is possible. And my role in that, as I've reflected over these past, 9, 10 years of my career, is that there's something that resonates, regardless of the through line I'm on, regardless of what organization I'm attached to or what thing I launched, there's a through line of what wakes me up in the morning and what keeps me up at night that I love and that I thrive on. And I was questioning this a year ago as launching SeedSpot and realizing that I didn't want to get back in a trap of feeling like I was doing something for public accolade. I was doing something to impress my mom, right? I wanted to do something that I believed in. And in meeting Tom, he asked me, what is it that you're really passionate about? And I was like, well, I'm passionate about a lot of things. I can talk to you about a lot of issues, from education to poverty to human trafficking. I mean, there's lots of challenges in the world that I'm passionate about, but I don't know what role I play in fixing them. And so he guided me through the Ignite process, asked a whole series of seemingly unrelated questions. I filled out the survey diligently, and out popped this talent, right? And this talent was presenting. It's always awkward to say that you have a talent when you're actually doing something that you supposedly have a talent in. You can be the judge. But this notion of presenting, right? This notion of inspiring in some capacity, right? And so he asked me then, what is it that you're really passionate about? What is that curiosity? What is that thing that you're gravitating toward? And what I loved about presenting, what I loved about speaking, and not in a public forum, but presenting anything, was possibility. I love presenting possibility. I love looking at a person or a room full of people and saying, what is possible with what you have within you? And that translated to this notion of inspiring, that I am an inspirer. That's not like a self-aggrandizing, that's a really awkward thing to say publicly. But that this thing, whatever it is, God-given, is this, I love inspiring people to believe that what they have within them, that there's something there that's worthy of pursuing. And so this passionate curiosity then coupled with this idea that there are thousands of problems in the world. And I'm not necessarily passionate about inspiring people to go build a new Maserati. Like, I'm not passionate about inspiring people to go make billions of dollars. Like, I don't care. I'm passionate about helping people and inspiring people to believe that they can change the world. And so through that, I've recognized that this is only one bit of my journey, that Youth Reaction Corps, New Global Citizens, SeedSpot, how I live my daily life, it's not about a job, it's not about a title, it's not about a career path. And when asked, what will you do 10 years from now? Where do you see yourself 10 years from now? And the outside projection continues, right? Continues to be, oh, you'll be blank, you'll do this, you'll take your talents here. I don't know. And quite frankly, I don't care. I don't have an aspirational platform or title or job or career trajectory that I'm trying to drive towards. And that's challenging for people to understand, because typically you have some aspiration of dollars or revenue that you want to grow your company to, or a title that you want to hold at some point in your life. I don't care so long as I'm living who I am. And I'll close by telling you that while Ray's primarily by my mother at a young age, and having this notion of you must do something worthy of public, and that's not a knock on my mom, it's just truly how I was raised. I built a relationship with my father when I was about 18 years old. Again, always in my life, but really truly built a strong relationship with my father at the age of 18. And he said something to me that I'll never forget as I was struggling through just being 18 and figuring out what the world looked like for me after I'd returned from Mexico. And he said to me, you know, Courtney, we're called human beings, not human doings. And I thought all my life I've been asked, and continue to be asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do? And it was always the same answer. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a doctor, right? That's a do, that's a function. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a firefighter. Function, a doing. Like, what do you actually want to be? And I've realized through this process with Tom that I want to be me, right? Like, I want to live a life that I'm proud of, that whatever natural talent I have is meaningful and coupled with this curiosity that I have intuitively in the world. And I wish and hope and dream that never changes. And that every person has that within them. And that if you've not, and this is not a plug for Tom, he didn't ask me to do this, but truly there's a gift that Tom is bringing to the world that is his natural curiosity coupled with his natural talent, that is helping other people discover that they too have that within them and that they can be married into one. And so Oscar, if you've never been to our building at Seed Spot, just drive in and drive right out the parking structure. Oscar today, he's our parking attendant at our building at Seed Spot. Oscar is the most jovial, kind-hearted, incredible human being you'll ever meet. And I've always questioned, like, Oscar, why are you in a booth? Like, why are you sitting in a booth? And I asked him today, totally not thinking that it would have any correlation to being on the stage tonight. I said, Oscar, why do you do what you do? Why are you in a booth in a parking structure at Thomas and Central? And you have to understand, the man was asked by Maya Angelou to write poetry for her. He was on stage at some incredible musical performances in New York. And I mean, had an incredible journey, incredible career. And he told me today, he says, Courtney, I'm in a booth in Phoenix because I want to connect with people every day. I love serving people. And Oscar every day writes us a note at Seed Spot, this inspirational note. And today's note was something, and I'll paraphrase, to the effect of, the minute that you clear the space in your life to realize who you really are, you have the freedom to just be. The moment that you clear the space in your life to realize who you really are, you have the freedom to just be. And you can call him a sage, which I firmly believe he truly is. But it was this striking moment to me as I pulled out of the parking structure today that he told me that. And that was the note that he gave me to put up on our wall. And I thought about the powerful notion of if we all could just be. If we didn't have to live to anyone else's expectations, but who we truly were. And so for me, this Ignite process has been about realizing what it means to just be. So here I am.
My name is Park Howell. I want to thank you for being here tonight, and thank you, Tom and Dave, for inviting me to come and tell you a little bit about my story and how Tom, in a really amazing way, helped ignite me, I don't know, almost a year ago. But before I start, I want to show you a little film trailer about a man by the name of Joseph Campbell. Does anybody in here know who Joseph Campbell is? And it's okay because very few people do. He was one of America's foremost mythologists. And he discovered a universal pattern in our lives that we all follow and we all read about and we all share in movies and TV shows we like. And it's something that we're on today. It's something that Ignite is all about. It's something that I've discovered over 30 years in the advertising communications business. And I congratulate you for being here tonight because you are on a bit of a quest. You don't know what this was about necessarily, Took some guts to show up. You don't know are you going to be wasting your evening or not. But it's precisely that in you that is going to help you achieve whatever it is you want to do. Because I've seen it over and over again. So let me start with this film trailer, and I highly recommend after this, over the next couple days, go online, download this film, and watch it for yourself. It's truly amazing.
Myths teach us is to go beyond the limits of our possibility.
Joseph Campbell was one of the leading mythology experts of all time.
He diagrammed all of our stories.
He finds this one story within all the stories that we can relate to no matter where you come from.
And he called it the hero's journey.
All the heroes, all the villains, they're all in there because they're all in here. This is where they come from.
In other words, we're not separate from the characters we see in our movies and in our novels. They are us. It's one journey. If this path of the hero's journey is fairly simple, why then is it that everybody isn't living it?
It's very difficult for a person with the media, with advertising. There's no creativity.
You end up on that treadmill and you can't get off.
We are each our own greatest inhibitors.
The one thing that keeps people small is their fears, or as Campbell says, it's their dragons.
It's a beast, it's a monster. I'll never forget seeing the ramp and this wave of fear just crashed over me.
It's going from an unsatisfying life to a satisfying life by pushing through the scariest things you can imagine.
I think people wake up to the fact that they're the hero of their own life when they get tired of being the victim of it.
This idea that our greatest selves are still hidden and that what we do with our lives is what makes us heroes.
Once I saw what was possible with a skateboard in your hand, I had to keep going. I mean, I just wanted to fly.
This is it. This is what happens when we follow our bliss. Magical things happen that we couldn't have imagined.
Do something that gives you that moment.
But if you can do that, then you can achieve the impossible.
The great obstacle for most of us is ourselves. If we can overcome that basic fear, in Campbell's terms, we can all be heroes.
And something I really highly recommend that you see, and it's what I start every talk with. I was in San Antonio 2 weeks ago presenting to the Association of Commuter Transportation Professionals, as exciting as that sound, but I had 500 people in an audience for their 4-day workshop, and I was kicking it off, and they all glommed onto that. I've done it with attorneys in Chicago, with CEOs of Goodwill International in Augusta, Georgia. And why this piece is so strong is because it resonates with all of us. So let me tell you a little bit about my journey and how I got here on the stage today. So I started way back when, Seattle, Washington, born in 1961, one of 7 kids. Now these are 7 kids born in 9 years. So you can imagine what my folks have been going through and what they put us through. My dad was a Depression-era father. He grew up in North Dakota where one Christmas he got a single present, and that was a pair of gloves because they were living in conditions that were 20 below zero. And he said it was the best present he ever received. That's me in the middle. And I'm surrounded by 2 engineers, a couple people in the horse business, a farrier, a physical therapist now. And I was the one that struck out more in the creative realm. I did a lot of things. Creative music in particular caught my attention. This is me taking piano lessons. I started when I was in the 3rd grade, went up through high school. In the 9th grade, I was starting to discover girls, and I had a paper out and I had all this other stuff, and my mom came to me and said, listen, you're not practicing the piano. We don't want to pay for it anymore if you don't get serious about it. And so I remembered at that point in my journey, I thought, well, if I quit now, I will probably never forgive myself. So I got to stick it out, get through it, and continue with my piano lessons. By the way, we were also big on the Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family. I don't know if you've ever seen those shows, but the Partridge Family bus was painted just like my hat. So it all worked very, very well together. As I was growing up, coming from a Depression-era father, you can imagine it was all about work. He would say, pick up that shovel or someone else is going to. It was all about a work ethic. And it was what we talked about earlier, about you got to go to school, you've got to get a good job, you got to get a good education, and you've got to rise up through the ranks. But I was a rotten student. I hated school. It was so boring to me. It was just rote, and it's not the way my brain is connected at all. It's not the way any of our brains are connected. Our brains are shaped for story. So education, unfortunately, with all of its best intentions, educates the storyteller out of it. In fact, I will say that you were probably at the top of your game as I was in kindergarten. And then as first grade comes, and second grade comes, third grade, heaven forbid you've got an MBA. Because if you go and get an MBA, they absolutely suck the storyteller out of you. In fact, I now lecture at Arizona State University in their W.P. Carey program, and I am one of the last people they bring in before their graduates go and get their diploma. And my whole thing is how not to become an MBA zombie. That do not show up into a conference room and suck the life out of it. The data's important, but you've got to turn it into drama and story. Anyways, when I was growing up about this age, in 1979, I went to my very first concert, and it was Elton John, and he was my superstar. I mean, he was in his heyday. It was at the Seattle Center Coliseum, and my older brother took me so I wouldn't get in trouble, and he had really rotten seats. In fact, we were sitting right behind the stage. But I loved him, because what I didn't realize was as I was sitting there, I could look right down the piano at Elton John playing, but I could see his whole apparatus. I could see the grips coming and going, the musicians coming on and off the stage. When they went for some big theatrical explosion of performance, I could see the guys bring the lights down the entire Coliseum, and I felt like I had this front row seat for the inner workings of this marvelous, marvelous performance. And so that, got me thinking, what could I do with music? Because I wasn't a particularly gifted piano player, nor did I really like the performance side of it, but I started thinking more and more about it. This is me about that time with my brother. We used to clean Mo Morris Woodview Arabian horse stalls, 52 of them, every day, $2 an hour, and we got one day off, and that was Christmas. So you can imagine what December 26th looked like. But this all goes back to the work ethic that our father put into us. And I knew I didn't want to do the manual labor. I knew I didn't want to get into engineering. So when I did finally graduate, I graduated from Washington State University with 2 degrees, one in communications and one in music composition and theory. I moved to Phoenix, Arizona, and I opened an ad agency 10 years later after I got here and got established. Park and Company were over on Indian School and 44th Street. And some people might argue that my profession from shoveling shit back in the old days hadn't changed from now being in the advertising business. But that's not what we were into. We were like, okay, what can we do to really make a difference? Use our communication and persuasion for good and not evil. And I wasn't really sure. We would do campaigns, and we would have some successful campaigns and not so successful ones, and I couldn't put my finger on what really made it all tick. But we were successful enough that we were carrying on and on and on. Well, about 2006, our middle son, who graduated from Arcadia High School here in town, went over to Chapman University and studied film. He was always fascinated with film. He came up making little stop action figures. He even got a film in the Phoenix Film Festival when he was a senior in high school. He was a great student, and so he would always call me about the different lectures they had and what he was seeing and the different editing classes. So I asked him to start sending me his textbooks because I wanted to know, what did Hollywood know about creating epic, epic stories that we could use in our line of work to create communications that we could rely on, that were going to work and were going to knit together meaning in people's mind. That's when I first met Joseph Campbell, and I started studying him. And I started looking at this hero's journey, and I started overlaying that universal pattern with everything we had been taught about communications. And I realized that this rote learning, where they dumb it down and they try to make it really technical, was nothing more than the hero's journey. The other thing I realized was we were talking at you, at consumers, trying to beat you over the head and trying to interrupt you when I said, this is stupid. We need to interact with their lives. We need to understand and get involved in the hero's journeys that they're on. And when we do that, when we're creating brand strategy or tactics or whatever, if you've seen any of the Goodwill commercials over the last 10 years, that's our work. And some of the best indication of how we were able to wrap the journey of Goodwill into the journey of their shoppers and their donators and so forth. So as I was continuing to study this, I was fascinated, and I started doing more of these sessions on storytelling, and I started dialing into it a little bit more. And then we started work with Max 6, and that's where I met Tom. I saw Tom's presentation very similar to what you saw tonight, and I said, this is really interesting, and I asked him, can I go through the process? And I did go through the process with him, and he took actually a couple of other folks through the process, and it blew me away because we do the studies and that understand what are your talents and so forth. I'm not sure my next slide here, but I think it's taking us into, we'll skip through this. I was lucky enough to be named Ad Guy of the Year in 2010. So I was doing something right, but I still wasn't quite sure what it was or how the storytelling thing was working. So then I met Tom, and I found out, again, much like Courtney, that one of my main talents was the ability to effectively communicate and move a room. People always said, Park, you have so much passion. And I could go in and pitch programs, and I could present creative because I had a lot of passion, but I would walk out of those rooms and think, passion isn't enough. Am I just making this stuff up? Where's the depth to that passion? Tom helped me find that depth, and it was really obvious. It was such an aha moment after a couple minutes, or a couple hours into it, I should say, that when we went through this process, he started backtracking. He started looking at my journey from the beginning. And he asked me some questions about favorite movies and that kind of thing. And he goes, Park, what I am finding your immense curiosity is understanding why does creativity work on us? Why does artwork work on us? And I go, really, why are you arriving at that? He says, well, what did you study in college? Composition and theory. Why did you study composition and theory? Because I was really interested on how music worked on us. Then I started thinking about that Elton John concert. Then I started thinking about my favorite movie, Amadeus. And he asked me about that, and he goes, why? And I go, I love that movie because I've just picked it apart, and I wanted to understand where were the writers coming from when they're talking about the pieces that they picked when they talked about Mozart. And how did they light it, and how did they put it together? And that's when it all came together. And he says, well, what are you doing now? And I go, well, I've been studying Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey and trying to understand how we can put this into the work we do to ignite important people doing important things in this world. And so as we went through this process, I found out, my number one curiosity is how do great storytellers arrive at the nuances that truly make a difference, that captivate you, the audience, and help move it forward. Now, the parallel to me in all of this, when you saw that beginning on Joseph Campbell, is in the hero's journey, in the story cycle, you always have a thing called an inciting incident. And what the inciting incident is when something happens in your life, you may have caused it, or it may have been brought upon you, that turns your world upside down and sets you on a new trajectory. And it's scary, like you saw in the Finding Joe. You're not sure what's going to happen next. You're not even sure why you're doing it, but it feels right. You even may get ridiculed from people. You may have parents saying, what are you thinking? You may have friends say, why are you throwing all that away? I thought you were going this direction when you decided to go this direction. Well, Tom was the inciting incident in my life. I mean, I knew where I was going, but it was like that crappy car you have that you kind of runs most of the time, and when you try to turn it off, it diesels and doesn't quite always turn off. Well, that was kind of my career until I really realized what Tom showed me. Clarity in what I was doing was what I was supposed to be doing already. He gave me the conviction to follow it fearlessly, and he gave me the confidence that I could do this. So what I did at the beginning of this year is I turned the reins to our agency over to our creative director. And I said, I need you to run this for a year, maybe 2 years, because I need to go and follow this path of really defining what this hero's journey is for people, for our company, and for the people that hire us to help them move their causes. So just in this short amount of time, since we did this, I have just literally today finished writing my book that people have asked me for 4 years on the power of storytelling. Yeah. And I must thank Tom, the folks at Ignite, and my agency for backing me up on that. I just came from ASU today, where I spent the day working with the School of Sustainability they've invited me and asked me to create the communications curriculum for the new Executive Masters in Sustainability Leadership, which we'll be launching in January. I mean, blew me away. Yeah, thank you. And I'm just as shocked maybe as you are. A couple other things. So, as you saw in Finding Joe, and what happens when you finally get this ignition and you take off, is these doors open up that you didn't even realize were there. In April, I found myself giving the same presentation, actually a workshop, in Hearst Media on the 24th floor in downtown Manhattan, which then led to another gigantic piece of business in Fresno, California that I came back from on Monday, the largest electronics recycling company in the world, called Electronic Recyclers International, are bringing us in to help them with their story. So something that's doing really good in this world. And then finally, our youngest son, who I haven't talked about tonight, was having some challenges. And since I saw such success that I had with Ignite and what it did with me, I sent him in a couple weeks ago, and he sat down with Tom and went through the program, and now he is ignited. And what he is looking to do is helping kids coming out of high school that have challenges. It could be everything from physical abuse challenges to drug abuse challenges, to help them overcome that in their young lives to move on to something greater. So I would like to finish by saying, I wish I could have done this 30 years ago. I would have given anything for something like this 30 years ago, because it has given me such clarity, conviction, and confidence in what I'm doing right now that I highly recommend it. My hat's off to Tom, and I'm really glad that he followed his bliss. Thank you.
When we were little, we were told that we could be whatever we wanted to be, and we believed it. We were encouraged to imagine, play, and explore. Astronauts, acrobats, artists, and athletes. Sky was always the limit. As a 5-year-old, when my mom asked me, "What do you want to wear to school today?" I would reply with every color of the rainbow. So I'd show up like this sometimes. As kids, we don't really know any other way to be but ourselves. I remember growing up, I loved writing, creating stories, and performing. And I hated shopping. My mom and my sister, on the other hand, loved it. So whenever we'd go to the mall, they'd go from store to store trying on clothes. And meanwhile, I'd be sitting in the corner with a pen and a notepad, writing down stories, jotting down ideas. When I got home, I'd be so excited. I'd pull out my dress-up tubby, and I'd try on all these costumes and act out all the stories I had thought about in my head. Fast forward to college. Going into my second year of college, I was in one of the most contemplative and questioning periods of my life. I was studying business, but in all my classes, I had no clear direction, no true meaning behind why I was in the classes that I was in. I began a morning ritual. Every morning before school, I'd wake up, I'd get ready, and I'd put on a video on my iPhone. The video was Alan Watts's "What Would You Do If Money Didn't Matter?" Has anyone seen this video? The premise of this video is simple. It asks you, what do you desire? What would you do if money didn't matter? How would you spend your days? As I'd be walking, I'd let my imagination run wild. I knew I wanted to travel. I knew I wanted to make a difference in my own way, but I didn't know how. Then I'd get to class, and my first class of the day was accounting. I'd sit down, and I'd tell myself to focus and stay paying attention. But I could feel that imaginative, excited part of me just dwindling. I didn't know why I was in these classes. I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel that makes it all worth it. I started to look outside of school for fulfillment. I surrounded myself by the change makers at Changemakers Central at ASU. Here, these kids were inspired. They were passionate about doing something that mattered, something meaningful, and they believed they could make a difference. I started a blog. This blog let my passion for writing and my need for self-expression pour out of me. It kept me up late at night and got me up at the break of dawn. I was so excited and invigorated to start each day because I was living with a purpose. Lastly, at the end of my second year of college, I joined a class in the summer to fulfill an elective that I needed for my major. This class was called The Art of Storytelling, and it is by far the best class that I have ever taken. Each 3-hour class felt like 30 minutes. I remember watching as my teacher came in the first day of class. She exuded this kind of confidence, this presence, this enthusiasm for what she was doing. And as she told her story, I could see her transform. I could see her take on the characters in all of her stories as she changed from an animal to a spirit to a god. I was truly inspired, and I wanted what she had, what she was giving. Throughout the class, I watched as each and every single person in that classroom changed. I heard them tell their stories about the transformations and the changes they had undergone to get to where they were at that exact moment. I felt incredibly impacted by each and every person, and something inside of me felt like whatever this is, whatever this excitement is, I need to get back to it. I need to figure out what this is and why I feel so ignited when I'm here. Ignite was truly what pushed me in the right direction. Because Tom asked me the questions that we as students never get asked, that we as humans never get asked. Instead of what's your major, what do you want to do when you graduate, and what are your extracurricular activities, Tom asked me the questions that truly matter. He asked me who I am. Where could I do my best work? What would I do if money didn't matter? He connected all of the dots that I already had in me. He unraveled all of the fears of not being good enough and all of the pressures that say that success is only monetary. What I found was that I have a natural talent for writing. I have an empathetic nature. I need to work in a flexible, dynamic environment with other passionate change makers. If I combine all of these things and follow my passionate curiosities, I can truly make my own difference. Now, I see a bright future. I changed my major from business to journalism with a minor in sustainability. And I feel so excited because I finally have a direction and I see where I want to go. I want to be a writer who captures all of the changes in people and our world. I want to be a writer who doesn't have to use a thesaurus or edit because she simply writes from the heart. I want to be a writer who inspires. I want to be a writer who captures the best of life. So my advice is this: never give up. Never give up on finding the answers to those questions, the important questions of who am I, what do I desire, what do I want to do if money was no object. We can all be the change makers. We can take our world and we can change it and we can make it how we see fit. But first, we must change ourselves. First, we must have the power and the courage to look inside. I want to end with a quote by my favorite author, Marianne Williamson. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond all measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. we ask ourselves, who am I to be gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? In fact, who are you not to be? Your playing small doesn't serve the world. We are all meant to shine as children do. It's not just in some of us, it's in all of us. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people the ability to do the same. As we liberate ourselves from our own fears, our presence automatically liberates others. Thank you.